This awesome podcast is now approved by Spotify.
I'm going to make software for the woodworking industry. It's so not sexy at all, but very big and real for so many companies. We make a lot more money. We even make more. Go be uncomfortable. Get in a situation that people hate. That's where the really good ideas are. I'm Brady Lewis. I'm the founder and current CEO of Allmoxy. And what we have done is over the last 10 years, we've built a small, I wouldn't call it small, we've built an ERP system primarily for the woodworking industry. It has ERP functions and also marketplace functions. Basically, our mission is just to streamline the whole supply chain, start to finish within the woodworking industry.
How did you get into this?
So I grew up in a cabinet shop. My dad took the leap of faith, quit his job, and started up a cabinet shop when I was very young. I grew up in the sawdust and trying to help him out with his business. And when I got to the point where I was running his company, years later, I realized that I needed software and could not find anything that would work for me. I naively just started building it myself, and here we are 10 years later.
Did you go to college there? And actually, where are you located? We didn't talk about that.
Yeah, so we're in, Allmoxy has its offices in Ogden, Utah. And I did a little bit of school at Utah State University in Logan, Utah. Didn't spend much time at college at all. And in fact, I don't code. So I'm not the developer. I'm kind of the person in between the developer and the sawdust. So I understand the woodworking environment and what those companies and owners look for. And I architect and build what they need, but I don't code.
So did your dad just make cabinets and then y'all would sell them? Can you explain a little bit for what you were doing right before you got there and what you were doing before? I guess you made this software.
Yeah, sure. So technically it's an outsourced manufacturer is what he is. Not your typical cabinet shop where you go up to the showroom and pick out your cabinets and they come and install. My dad had the foresight to kind of go after those people are his customers. So he builds components for cabinet shops. So he's sort of like an OEM. So he just does all the doors, the boxes, all the parts for all of these shops that just outsource the manufacturing to him. That way he doesn't have to deal with the homeowner. So it's more of an assembly line, more of just a manufacturing focused business.
Like if I went to Lowe's, for instance, and wanted to buy cabinets to do myself, like the one who does those?
Yeah. So you would be buying them from a cabinet shop.
Right.
And that cabinet shop would be buying them from a company like my dad's. Yeah.
Okay. And what's OEM stand for?
Oh, good question. I understand it as it's a term that everyone uses for like they're the original manufacturer. And I don't know exactly original something
manufacturer. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because I've heard of OEM parts before from like for cars. And that makes sense because whenever going to the dealer, they always want you to say OEM parts, which are the dealer's parts versus quote unquote knockoffs that are half the price. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're buying an Apple computer, but it's full of parts from other OEM manufacturers, right? So like the chips are, Asus is an OEM. So exactly what that acronym is, I can't remember, but that's the idea.
Oh, we got 2 of the 3 letters. Good. What was your dad doing in like sales and how many employees were there, before you started implementing this software? And like, what is it like today?
So when I came to work with my dad, just when I started, there was probably, 10 of us, all shop floor employees, a couple office staff. Then when I started working on the software, maybe 15 to 20 of us, 3 or 4 office staff. After implementing our software, jump towards today. So today there are only 5 office staff still, but 100 employees in the shop. So it's hard to kind of put in perspective, but in my industry, it would be more typical to have at 100 employees in the shop, probably 30 to 40, 20 to 25 maybe office staff. So my software allows companies to really automate a lot of those mundane office tasks that are just part of our industry.
Basically, at first you were just using this in your dad's shop and now you actually sell that software to other cabinet manufacturers?
Yeah. So the first time we built it, I just needed to solve our immediate problem. We basically hard coded it just for our need. And then it started really working really fast. And a lot of our customers started asking, what is going on? What are you using? How can I get something like that? We even had a competitor offer money for it and wanted to buy it outright. So it was kind of at that point where we're like, okay, look, we've got another opportunity here in software. This is a real need, not just for us, but for everyone out there. So we started Allmoxy and rewrote it to not be hard coded. And that's kind of how it all began.
And can you give us more details on that? When was the breaking point where you realized you wanted or needed to make this software? And what was step 1, step 2, step 3?
Great question. Yeah. So, step 1 was me going from the shop floor, just eating sawdust, packing boards around all day long, to having an interest in the office. I think this is a step that gets overlooked a lot, especially in, like manufacturing type environments, is we spend all this time and money on the floor, looking at machines, looking at efficiencies. But the reality is the data is what feeds all these things. So I recognized early on that as quick as we can get out cabinets and doors, the data coming in is very important. So I went into the office kind of with this excitement to tackle that problem. I guess step 1A was we had an Excel sheet that was basically running the shop, and learning Excel, becoming, I guess, acquiring the ability to write formulas that were, 5 pages long that did all this stuff. That was kind of the first step. And I realized the ideas keep coming and the things you want to accomplish with software, just kept coming. And I quickly realized, Excel, we're going to top out with this. So I quickly moved it to Access Database. And again, this is just, I grew up in a farm community and in a cabinet shop. So this is just this kid without any education kind of solving problems best he knew how, right? And that was with Excel, then Access. And then after Access kind of opened my mind as to network capabilities, I started thinking, and this was about the time that pretty much everyone was on Hotmail or whatever. And pretty much everyone was starting to use web apps. And I kind of put it together at that point. Okay, we have Access over here doing all these cool things, but what if it were on the web? And what if we take all of this stuff and put it on the web? We didn't have the terminology cloud, but this idea of the cloud back then just really blew my mind, and I just couldn't get there fast enough. So at that point, I actually did hire a web developer to help me get all of that to the web, because I could figure out Excel, Access just fine by myself, but I didn't know any coding. I didn't have any languages under my belt, so I didn't feel comfortable building it.
What year was that? What year did you start it, and what year did you go work in your dad's shop, and then you're using Excel, and what point did you do Access, and at what point or what year did you switch to the web?
This is a good question. I actually got called out on this just the other day. Someone was like, I swear you told me a different date the other day, and I think they're right. I think I probably need to go back and get my story straight. So having said that, I think it was about 2007 when we that was probably 2006, 2007 was the Excel era. And then, or maybe probably 5 and 6 was Excel. Probably 6 and 7 was Access. And then I think 8 was when we actually made the move to web-based.
Well, so it's still pretty quick, it seems like, to jump from one versus the others. If you're going from Excel and doing all those formulas to jumping into Access and 2 years later doing web, did it seem like it was too slow?
Yeah, it went very quickly. The software just couldn't keep up with kind of what I saw it doing and what I wanted to do with it. And so it very quickly went from one thing to another. So
were the web-based ones, were those SharePoint lists, or is it something totally different, using different database systems?
It was a MySQL database, and yeah, it was a homegrown, custom-built MySQL web-based.
Could you walk us through the differences? Was it an issue when you were telling your dad, hey, I want to try using Access? I imagine after Access, did that help you expand the company, I assume? And then, so I'm sure the web-based thing was a little bit of a easier sell, but can you tell us what the differences were?
There was this constant struggle between me and my dad. My dad's an old school, cabinet hard-nosed guy, worked at a steel mill. So, and he taught us to work. Everything was work, work, work. The harder your sweat, sweating, the more money you're making. So it was a little bit difficult for him to wrap his head around this thing that I wanted to sit in the office and create, just sitting on my butt. And that sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth right now, but that was and is the reality for a lot of people, especially in his generation. So it was always really hard to convince him that this is even necessary or important. And we had a lot of arguments and discussions about if I should even be spending time on this. I tried to do my best at getting value, showing him, look, I improved. I spent 8 hours yesterday on this and the Excel sheet. It now does this. That will save us X amount of hours next week. So I tried to do a good job through the whole process of showing him, look, this is actually affecting your day, my day, how much we can actually sweat. Because if we're doing this, we can go out in the shop and sweat, bust our balls and make money. So it went not without trial through all those three, but it was a fight, but I feel like I was able to kind of show him and credit to my dad. He gave me a lot of credit. Even though he argued me, he ultimately let me do it. And he ultimately trusted in me and actually threw money at it. And, his actions spoke very loudly. Is that the question you answered? I kind of maybe went off on a tangent.
No, you did that perfectly. But yeah, I mean, just the implementation, because going from Excel to Access and you did it all yourself, it sounded like that's a big hurdle in of itself. So what were the differences?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a lot of late nights. I mean, yeah. I did this after hours. I didn't want my dad to have to, half the arguments I knew I could save by just doing it covertly at night or whatever. So I did that a lot. It didn't really transfer per se. You can't just copy paste things back and forth. It's kind of a different platform. So it just kind of had to be rebuilt. But the concepts behind it, how you figure out this, how you figure out that, I feel like the Excel sheets going through the activity of how do I come up with this number in Excel made the other steps easier, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And then really, honestly, the reason your story resonates a lot with in my company, I basically was doing the same type of thing. I just had an Excel list of people that I would want to call on and real estate owners. And then actually I went and figured out how to do Microsoft Access and then did that myself, made my own program and kind of play around with it because at the same time I had to go make sales. But I'm like, if I can do it this way, it's going to make it life easier. And then brought a developer in and helped me out with more of the Microsoft Access and then used like a SharePoint list where I had virtual assistants plugging in information. So it's just being able to understand that one Excel list was not going to work forever. I was topping out. I can only put in so much information. I'm getting duplicate information. And then once you realize like what a database is on like the power it holds, I think it's a game changer.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a perfect story. It's very, very similar. So yeah, you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, exactly. Then so eventually I'd have to get a developer from like Upwork. Maybe you can talk about the changes that you made. It's because basically I wanted to link multiple owners to one property. So the way I built Form is that way. And then I'd add in more details till I try not to overcomplicate it because I think that's what happens a lot eventually. But it's just trying to keep everything's a database really at the end of the day when you start looking at them. Even like iTunes, for example, is not really just a music player. It's a database with the play count on there, but it just happens to be on your actual computer. So once you figure that out, I remember it was just like a light bulb moment for me because I was in real estate the whole time. I never even thought about what the hell is a database. I heard about Access, but I'm like, oh, okay, this is how things interconnect.
Right. Yeah, that's me too. I had no idea. I didn't have any intention to be in the software business. All I knew is I needed to solve a problem and I would literally just get on the computer and say, okay, here's the tools in front of me. And luckily I had Excel and Access. I had the Microsoft suite sitting there and I thought I can leverage this, so it was that's the only reason that I even used those is because they were sitting there on my computer.
But what was your database doing? Like comparatively to the Excel sheet, was it just like, hey, you're keeping cabinet information in each one of these, so every day you'd have to print it off, or what? What's the leaps and bounds that helped that company?
The cool thing, the reason that I went from Excel to the database, what I realized there is, the Excel sheet was a good way to keep information straight and do calculations. But what I wanted to do next is I wanted to create workflows. I wanted to be able to give a guy a button that he could just push and it would do 10 things. That's what I really needed. And so that's what I feel like Access gave us, is that ability to create a button and that button would do these 10 things, move this data there, and voila. And also, get it just off this computer. I don't want it just to be a file on one computer. I want to have this database accessible in the shop. And it's kind of an archaic thing to think about now with everything web-based and cloud-based. But back then it was pretty, I don't know, kind of cutting edge for us at least, to be able to have all these buttons on the shop floor.
Can you give us a harder example? What 10 things would it do versus what you did before? Because I just want to understand the building of your company and how you were getting enlightenment moments while you're building.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one I haven't thought about in a very long time. So I might struggle to come up with 10, but off the top of my head, a few things I can remember. Like we had the guy in the supply bay, for example. When wood showed up, he had a little input box that he could say what wood it is, how much showed up, and he could hit the button and it would check it into inventory. So we knew. So then at the front office, I knew exactly how much wood we had out there. We could, click another button that would print out a remake sheet. So if we had a problem with one of the doors coming through the shop and say this door is, got something that needs to be remade on it, we could put the job number in, hit go, and it would print out, the necessary sheets that I could then take back up to get the thing remade. Just little things like that Excel couldn't handle. I mean, if I had to oversimplify it, maybe I would just say I was able to create buttons that accessed information and sent it out in a different way. And we did things like time tracking. So we started tracking people's time, clocking in and out, not having to use the old time card stamps anymore, things like that.
I want to bore everyone. I've always been curious on what the differences were and when you made that leap and bounds. So let's go ahead and just talk about making the software and then selling it. And did you make it underneath another LLC? How did you know how much to charge? Tell us more.
Yeah. So when we went from Access and hired our first developer, like I said, we hired it and we just did it to solve our own company's problem. You want me probably to go beyond that, right? When we started actually.
Whatever you think would be most helpful to entrepreneurs who are listening, if you're looking back, anything that would be most helpful to them.
Yeah. And here's maybe a key point that I'd like to make. Speaking of helping younger entrepreneurs right off the bat is I didn't go into this thinking I'm going to make software for the woodworking industry. I mean, who would really? It's so not sexy at all. But what I did do is I had a clear problem to solve, and it was very unsexy, but very big and real for so many companies. And I got that idea by just being in the sawdust, so I think a lot of probably the next generation has this ability to kind of avert the difficult, the manual labor type stuff. They want to just come up with the next big thing and sit at their desk all day. But I really think that getting dirty, getting in some unglamorous spot, doing some unglamorous thing is where those ideas are really powerful. That's where they actually live. I mean, when you have to do something that really sucks over and over again, you can easily see a way to solve it. And so I think if I'm talking to entrepreneurs, that's one of the main things I would say is go be uncomfortable. Go get in a situation that people hate, because that's where the really good ideas are that are going to disrupt things. And even if it's not, I started a big company because of this problem, it might be just that, look, all I did is went to my boss and said, there's an app that solves this and I will run it for you. And I'm now a salaried employee that hardly does anything and my life's awesome, or whatever. But the fact is, being in that uncomfortable spot, I think breeds these ideas and breeds what needs to be built next. Anyway, so having said that, yeah, that's what happened to me. I mean, we built it for our own company, then we had it hired. And like I kind of already said, we built it thinking this could be something that we sell to other people. So at that point, when we actually did have people offering us money and our customers asking us for it, we came up with a separate company and had the idea to do what we did for that company and lots of other companies. And quite frankly, had no clue what we were doing and no clue what to price it at, no clue how long it would take to do everything. Just blindly went into it saying there's problems to solve and money to be made. Let's just figure it out.
Can you jump into those details? I mean, how much did it cost? And you're talking about how long did it take? Were you still working at your old job while you're working with the developer?
Yeah, I worked at my old job really through 2012 or 13 probably. So I kind of had to split time And the way that I did it is, the way that I justified it is I would build something into the new app, Allmoxy, that would eliminate the time that I used to have to spend, and then I would devote that time to building Allmoxy. So for example, I used to spend 2 hours a day walking around with a clipboard in the wood storage area, taking inventory of all the wood we had, and then I'd come in and look at all the orders we had, and I would tally out and figure out how much we had versus how much we need, and then I'd place orders for all those with our vendors. So I built, as one of the tools in Allmoxy, as one of the first tools, the system that would track and automatically allocate and give me that list and even just order it for me. So just by building that, now I have a couple hours a day extra to work on Allmoxy, and it just snowballed. Every time a problem would walk in the door, we would see if we could solve it with software, and just more and more time spent going to it. So yeah, I built I worked the two jobs at the same time.
And so was there no other inventory software that you're talking about that could do this?
So back then, yes, there were inventory softwares. There were some of the more obviously there were accounting softwares. There were inventory software. There were lots of fragmented types of software. But, and this is critical to kind of understand why this company works. So for our example, the inventory, to figure out how much wood we need for these doors, every door is a different size, a different wood, all kinds of customization in cabinetry, right? So to understand that, we kind of need to have the order and all of its details sitting in front of us. So you can't really just say, oh, I have 20 doors. The inventory for that is X amount because I know how much is in 20 doors. Well, how big are the doors, and how much waste is in that type of wood? So none of the inventory systems of the day could handle anything like that because they're just looking for simple inputs. We're not selling a small, medium, large t-shirt. We're selling these incredibly complex, customizable products that vary all the time.
Where are you all at in revenues today?
I'm not allowed to give that.
Can we say over $1 million?
Yeah.
How's it run today versus what it was doing before? What's your day-to-day like now?
So my day-to-day, we actually have this year gone to almost completely remote. All of us work wherever we want. So I have a lot of flexibility as to where I work. Just got back from Vegas with my wife where I worked while she was getting ready,
Did you get married there?
No, we just went for fun. But my day-to-day now pretty much is checking the Slack channels. We use Slack for internal communication, and we use Intercom for communication with our customers. So I'm kind of just monitoring that and making sure that everything is running. And I do the things that kind of nobody can do yet. I build the business. So right now I'm putting together our KPIs and figuring out what are the things we should be measuring and building a dashboard around that, for example.
How do you come up with the name Allmoxy?
Good question. That Moxie, have you ever heard the term Moxie?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of that showbiz name from the golden age of film. If you got Moxie, you got balls or whatever, you got the X factor. So we kind of liked that idea because we knew that early on, especially, people would look at this and be like, oh, that's what I'm looking for. They would get it, or else they would just look at it and shake their head. And so I liked the idea of Moxie, and then taking the IE off the end and adding a Y because it looked better in a logo, and then adding the all because we could get the domain name for it. So Allmoxy.
And I think this is your number one question and answer, it looks like, on the site. So can you tell us how much you charge?
Yeah. So we're actually in the merchant processing business primarily. We charge $65 a month, and that's kind of just covers our hosting and whatnot and, basic customer support. Our real money is made in merchant processing. So we partner with Stripe. And so the transactions that happen inside of our instances between our customers and their customers, we get a kickback from Stripe. So we're making X% of every transaction that happens there.
Did you eventually go to that business model? Did you try different models? Can you tell us about this a little bit more?
Oh, we tried every model. I've tried everything. I think we started off at $300 a month flat fee. We went, for the longest time, we did 1% of gross sales through the system. And we actually signed quite a few people up like that. We actually still have a couple people that prefer that model that we've went ahead and allowed to continue like that. And I could talk for hours on why and how we came to this. But basically, it comes down to, we've offered it for free, but it comes down to this, people want to feel like they're paying something. Free free was actually bad for us because it gave people the perception that there wasn't anything here for them. It couldn't, if it's free, it can't be good, you know? So we had to give them a number that is something, but yet something they don't have to go to their accounting department and ask permission for, you know? So it can be somewhat spontaneous sign up, and then it's low enough to where it's a no-brainer. And the merchant processing thing, by getting money on the back end, we feel like we get points. We hear a lot of, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Thank you so much for thinking of that, because now I don't have to pay you. You just get your money from the evil bank, you know? So it's kind of that mentality of, we figured out how to get our money elsewhere so we don't have to charge our customers.
Did you see a significant increase in revenue by doing it this way versus before?
We actually saw a significant, yes, to answer your question, we make a lot more money, and we even make more money now that we went away from free. Once we went to $65 a month instead of free, nothing else changed. We actually started having a lot more sign up.
I was not expecting $65 a month. I mean, I thought it'd be at least a couple hundred, whatever, maybe a couple thousand per month, and not doing the percentage on whatever they purchase. Can you just was it 2x what you were doing before? I just want to hear the different pricing thing. So if someone else was thinking about doing something, maybe they could use your type of pricing model.
It's a good question. And I don't have concrete data for it.
Right.
But shooting from the hip, I would say that when we went from, well, first of all, when we went from 1% of gross sales, which probably no one is interested in because that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
When we went from that to free, we probably saw 5x. And then when we went from free to 65, we probably doubled that.
What percentage were you charged when free model versus quote unquote free? You're just not paying per month. They're paying on the transaction of everything that they purchase through your software? Yeah.
So they don't actually send us a check. So
right.
Stripe is the one that pays us.
Right. And so what percent?
It's actually different for every customer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all back end stuff depending on the deal and the customer we have.
Yeah.
So it's all Stripe stuff.
I mean, can you give us a range? So like if someone wanted to do this, maybe, I don't know if y'all went to Stripe and talked to them about it. I think it's very unique. I think it's pretty smart.
Yeah. So with Stripe, we try to keep our rates, even with whatever we have on top, we try to keep that rate below or, in the range of what a normal credit card company is going to charge. But we get anywhere from like 0.5% to 1%. And again, depending on a few factors, but we want to make sure that at the end of the day, our customer isn't feeling like they're getting ripped off or paying extra. It's still within the range of what they would normally be paying.
So, I mean, have y'all ever thought about going to different industries? Can different industries use this actual product to deal with that?
Yeah. And actually, when I started Allmoxy, it was with the intention to take it to any type of industry that it would apply to. And the funny thing is that as more time has gone on, the more focused I am in trying to keep it in one industry. It does work for multiple industries. I mean, I've set up restaurants and we do have customers that are doing a few different other things with it. But what I like about what we're doing is that I can keep things very pure and very niche. And if I do that, then I can charge a premium for it. So if I know the lingo in my industry and I can talk to a customer face to face and understand all the lingo, all the nuances of that industry, it's a pretty easy sell versus going into somewhere else where I don't and having to kind of learn and change and add more and more and more buttons to my app, which ends up just confusing everybody.
What do you see for the future?
Well, we just launched a 3D designer this summer. So now our customers are able to give to their customers a 3D cabinet design, completely web-based, really intuitive on the web. So you'll be seeing quite a bit more of that, I hope, when you go to build your house or get your kitchen done. Hopefully you'll start seeing Allmoxy instances running the show. So we're excited about that, and that will drive more of our marketplace. So what I see happening from now till then is kind of unifying the industry with this design software and then connecting through our back-end marketplace all these vendors, suppliers, manufacturers to each other to make the flow of data and information just just flawless and easy, and sending all this data just right to their machines so that they can just focus on building stuff.
And actually, people can go to your site and do play with a demo site in order to look at it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to be a cabinet guy to really appreciate it, but I mean, maybe not. Maybe
I don't think so, because I'm looking at it. It makes sense, everything that's going on here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I get it. What are actually, because I don't remember any hard obstacles that you really come over. I mean, other than the father dealing with that in the beginning, been the other hardest parts.
I think my mind immediately goes to the low part of the recession, which what would have that been 2008 or so, probably end of 2008. I mean, I remember sitting there after, because at this point we're still hand in hand with the cabinet company. Really, all the funds that are being used are from that company. So if that company suffers, Allmoxy suffers. And I mean, at that point we were down to a part-time developer and myself, and just trying to survive, just trying to keep this idea moving forward. And I remember, having the shop had just fired one of its main employees because it couldn't keep the payroll, and Allmoxy was just literally on the chopping block. It was just one of those things where we want to keep this going, but we just can't. And I remember tears being shed. I mean, I remember family arguments. I remember really hard conversations and, personal things being thrown around. And it was a very, very difficult time. And, I get PTSD just thinking about it, but, we were able to kind of just hang on by a thread, make compromises. We were all able to tell each other we're sorry, swallow our pride, and we got through it. So, but that was probably the low point. That was probably one of the biggest challenges, is getting buy-in on a software company, quote unquote, from a cabinet company, quote unquote, through a recession when the cabinet company is suffering big time.
And what'd you learn from it?
I think the biggest takeaway was probably just persistence and grit. I mean, you just can't give up. There were so many times when I probably just should have. I mean, it would have made all the sense in the world to just take a break, or, justify it as, look, timing's not right or whatever, and shut it down temporarily. But I think if you just have that determination and grit and just let that be almost like a real baby, like you just cannot let it die, then I think there's an awesome staying power in that. And I'm sure glad that happened. I can't take credit for it all. I mean, I wish I could say that I never considered it or fully always believed in it. But I think just persistence is a big lesson that I took away from that recession. And maybe with that, just quickly, I think expectations too, because I mean, when you're going through a time like that, you kind of have to drop your expectation of whatever your end goal is. I see myself in this big office with all these employees and this big shiny logo out front, blah, blah, blah. If that's the thing in your mind and that's what's kind of driving you and that's where you want to get someday, you kind of got to lower your expectations in a tough time and just say, look, that's not me right now. Maybe I'm going to have to do this, and that. And maybe that's not glamorous. Maybe that sucks temporarily. But if you can shift your expectations, I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think I had to shift my expectations during that time to kind of make it work and survive.
Talking about that, what's the best advice that you have for anyone who's like kind of starting their own company, or any other lessons that you might want to share with them before we get off? I
think I've already hit on this, but I harp on it quite a bit, kind of locally. And a lot of the chatter I hear in the startup community is around this question of what should I start? What is the thing? What is it? I mean, in every conversation you hear about a new app, it comes up, well, what should it be doing? What should be its focus? And I think that a lot of times, and I've made this mistake myself, we start from the wrong end. I think that we need to get in and get dirty and talk to people in, like I said, those unglamorous situations. We need to talk to people at the bottom. We need to spend a day in their shoes. We need to, shovel the shit. We need to walk in the sawdust. And I think as we do that, the ideas will become very clear as to the what. And I mean, the how anymore, that's commonplace. I mean, almost anyone can find a developer and build an idea. It's the what should I be building and how does it interact and how does it work? That's the main the thing that I think young entrepreneurs get wrong so many times. And that's why there's so much, kind of churn and pivoting.
We appreciate you coming on and sharing the story. If people want to say thanks for doing the interview, what's the best way to reach you?
They can email me, brady@allmoxy.com. And I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. Hey there, Millionaire Interview listener. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it and want to show us a little support, we would really appreciate a 5-star review. It helps other listeners find the show so they can enjoy it, just like you. And if you're looking for more episodes that are in the product niche, then try episode 11 with Bottle Breacher founder Eli Crane, or episode 13 with Sammy of BlackSocks.com, or try episode 18 with Yak Gear founder Bill Bragman. As always, thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day.
People don't care who